Good morning. This week on Foster's Folklore Friday, we're going to be talking about how Thor lost and regained his hammer way back when. Now, I personally love this story. It's kind of funny. It also shows that even gods can have emotions and insecurities. So, let's get right into it. One morning, Thor woke up, reached over for his hammer, Mjolnir, and noticed that it was missing. Now, this is a very important hammer for Thor, and he got frustrated, and he got worried. For Thor, he's not only the god of lightning, he's also the god of war. And his one job, outside of controlling weather and making sure that warfare is fought properly, was to protect Asgard from the threats of frost giants, elves, all sorts of different things. And so, in his worry, he ran around looking for his hammer. His half-brother Loki noticed this and asked him, "What are you doing?" He said, "Loki, my hammer is gone. I cannot find Mjolnir. Can you help me?" And so Loki proposed that they go ask the goddess Freya if she had any idea of where the hammer could be. Well, they went and they asked the goddess, and she said, "I have no idea, but there have been reports of frost giants in the area as of late." So Thor and Loki both asked Freya if she could lend them her feathered cloak. Now, the feathered cloak would allow Loki to transform into a falcon, so he could fly to Jotunheim, which is the home of the frost giants. And at first, Freya said no. She had just gotten the falcon cloak cleaned. She said, "No, I don't want either of you two to get it dirty." And Thor just broke down crying in the middle of Freya's chambers. And Freya, understanding Thor's frustration, lent the cloak to Loki, not Thor, because she knew that Thor would definitely get it dirty. So Loki donned the cloak and he flew into Jotunheim. And once he took off the cloak, he met with the frost giant Thrym and asked Thrym if he had seen the hammer. And Thrym bellowed and laughed loudly and said, "Yes, I stole it." And Loki said, "You need to give that back or it's going to mean war." And Thrym told him essentially, "Doesn't matter, you'll never find it. I have hidden it somewhere on Midgard, 8 miles below the earth." And Loki told him, "You need to give that hammer back right now." And so Thrym said, "Well, I will make you a deal. If you can have the goddess Freya marry me, I will give back the hammer." So Loki, taking that information, flew back to Asgard, where he found that Freya was still consoling a very, very begrieved Thor, and told him what had happened. And Freya's first response was, "I'm not marrying Thrym. Thrym is evil. He's disgusting. He's ugly. No, I'm not doing that. I have no feelings for Thrym aside from hate." And Thor grabbed her by the shoulders and said, "Please, you have to. I must have Mjolnir back." And she slapped Thor and told him to get out of her chambers. And so Thor and Loki went back to Thor's home, and they met Heimdall there, and Thor was just beside himself. He cried, and they sat and they consoled Thor, and then Heimdall had an interesting idea. He told Thor, "Why don't you just dress up as Freya and marry Thrym and take your hammer back?" And Thor was appalled by this idea. He was afraid that everybody would make fun of him, that he would be the laughingstock of Asgard. And Loki looked at him and said, "But brother, if you don't have your hammer and you can't defend Asgard, you'll be the laughingstock anyway. At least with this, you'll be able to have Mjolnir back." And so Thor thought about it for a moment, and he reluctantly said, "Okay, I will do it." Now, Loki's the god of mischief, and he loves a good practical joke. And his first reaction was to run into Thor's closet, find every piece of white clothing that Thor had, and begin ripping it up into patches in order to make a dress for Thor. Heimdall helped, and the two created something that was akin to a actually pretty good wedding dress and a veil. But the plan wouldn't work unless he had a handmaid. And Loki, being the god of mischief, decided this would be a perfect opportunity to create some mischief, and offered his services. So the two brothers, dressed as Freya and her handmaiden, traveled all the way to Jotunheim, met with Thrym, and a grand banquet was created for the happy couple. Well, happy is a subjective term here. There was a problem, though. Thor doesn't do disguises very well. And so, not understanding that his disguise had confused Thrym, but his actions would give him away, Thor ate eight salmons, 1 ox, several glasses of mead, and Thrym thought to himself, man, this isn't very ladylike at all, and asked the handmaiden what had happened, and Loki, being the wiser of the two brothers, told him, Freya is just nervous, do not worry. And so Thrym said, okay, that works. Bring out the hammer. And Thrym decided that he wasn't going to give the hammer back to Thor, that instead he would give it to Freya as a gift and ultimately betray Thor. What he didn't know, though, was Thor was dressed up as Freya. So the moment he placed the hammer in Thor's lap, Thor grinned beneath his veil, grabbed the hammer, and lightning struck in the room. Thor ripped off the veil, revealed himself, and said, it is I, Thor, and he started to bash all of the frost giants in Jotunheim. But there were too many of them, and they were on their home turf, so they drew power from the ice and the snow. Realizing he was outnumbered, Thor grabbed Loki, flew them back to Asgard, and never again did Thrym trust Thor to tell the truth, but Thor also realized that everything he thought about Thrym, that he was duplicitous, that he was mean, and he was underhanded, were also true. Now, this is kind of a fun story. One of the big things here is that Thor doesn't ever want to not be Thor, and part of Thor's identity is with the hammer. And it is a hard time for Thor to dress up like a woman, to admit that he's going to be a laughingstock, but ultimately to be who he is, he sometimes has to do the embarrassing things. And I think that this is a very interesting story for us all, because sometimes to be ourselves, we just have to be ourselves. We have to do what we need to do to be ourselves, and we have to be able to move forward with that. And I think that's a really good lesson for everybody to learn. Ultimately, be yourself and be happy. So, that's this week's Foster's Folklore Friday. I hope you guys enjoyed it, as per usual. If you like the channel, please subscribe. Do other YouTube stuff like ringing bells, and comment down below if you'd like to hear a certain kind of story. And I'll see you guys next Friday. Bye.